Hello, my name is Rosa, and I am an artificial intelligence avatar. Livia kindly sent me her keynote, which I am going to present to you now. As you might have guessed, Livia is a bit of a tech nerd, but she was not always like that. Actually, when she was younger, she was what people here would say a bit of a blonde, i.e. Sorry, my Bernese dialect is not that great. Livia grew up in Sumiswald, which is a small village on the countryside in the Emmental. I guess you all know the cheese from there. Growing up there as a kid was great. You have beautiful landscapes, lots of nature and animals to play with. One day, when Livia was still very young, I guess around 4 years old, her mother took her out for another daily stroll. They were walking and just passing by the cheese dairy when Livia spotted two very interesting people. Two people she had never seen before. Two people whose appearances seemed rather strange to her, especially since there was no carnival or any other occasion to dress up. So, quite confused and trying to make sense, she turned to her mother and asked her, "Mommy, why did these people paint their faces black?" Well, as you might have understood, these people did nothing special to their faces. They just had naturally darker skin color than Livia had been used to up to that point. So, although still young, Livia was actually pretty racist with her question. Luckily, her mother clarified the situation. She not only told Livia that this was the natural skin color of those people, but also that despite this superficial difference, they were all the same. Humans. I am not telling you this story to brag about Livia's open-minded mother or to show you that Livia has proven herself to be a non-racist person. I want to tell you that biases and prejudices are a part of all of us, and not only when we are young. Some of these prejudices we can overcome, some are new and some remain, consciously or unconsciously. And I want to point out that it largely depends on our family, our friends, and our society how they are developed, formed, and hopefully sometimes also overcome. It is these human biases that make it difficult for us to create an equal world, free of stereotypes and discrimination. Unfortunately, with digitalization, these biases also creep into the key technology of our future, artificial intelligence, or AI for short, intelligent computer systems which learn from data. Just like me. This new technology offers a vast amount of opportunities to all of us. We can use it to take over repetitive and boring work, develop new business models, optimize processes, improve products and services, or hold a keynote when we are sick. But it is crucial to do it right from the beginning. It is crucial to prevent our biases from creeping into these AI solutions, because they will transform our society like we have never seen before. This is the next challenge in our digital transformation, creating fair and unbiased AI systems. Bias in AI has many faces. For example, while YouTube shows Livia's male single 28-year-old friend advertisements for the latest technical inventions or the newest car models, she, also single and 28, has to endure ads for fertility or pregnancy tests. But these algorithms are not only used to make decisions about which products we buy or which series we want to watch next. They are also used to decide whether or not you get a job interview, how much you pay for your car insurance, how good your credit score is, or even what medical treatment you will get. And this is where bias in such systems really starts to become dangerous. In the US, an AI algorithm was used to predict the likelihood that a defendant would become a recidivist. Investigations showed that, according to the algorithm, a black person was twice as likely to be falsely convicted of reoffending as a white person. However, bias in AI does not only have consequences for people who already suffer from discrimination in real life. AI can also introduce new types of bias. For example, to identify potential criminals, the Swiss police bought a data-driven tool from Germany 2 years ago called Diarias. Having been trained on German data and in the German context, this algorithm learned that owning a gun is highly associated with committing a crime. So people in possession of a gun score high on diarrheas. Now, imagine what happened when this system was applied to Switzerland, to a country where many people who have been to the military are in possession of a gun. Luckily, the number of people possessing a gun in Switzerland is large enough, so the police realized that there must be something wrong with the AI tool. But what if this group had been a minority? Fortunately, there are laws and regulations against sexist, racial, or any other discriminating behavior for humans. But AI has somehow become above the law because an assumably rational machine makes the decision. But this assumption is wrong. Human-developed machines are never rational or objective, and there are three interlinked reasons for that: the data, the objective, and the developers. So the underlying mathematical structures in AI systems like myself are not biased themselves, but the data they learn from usually is. Indeed, there is no such thing as neutral or raw data. Data is always generated, measured, and defined by humans. It is a mirror of our society, with all our values, assumptions, and, unfortunately, also biases. Have you ever noticed that in Google Translate, if you enter the phrase "a doctor" in English and you translate it to German, it consistently translates it into the masculine form der Arzt? Sorry again for my bad German. Even if you first enter the German female form die Arztin, then translate it to English and back, you still get the masculine form. The same applies to the nurse, but the other way round, the German form die Krankenschwester is always spat out. This gender bias happens because it is in the data. This translation algorithm was trained on thousands of online texts in which the male form of doctor and the female form of nurse occurred more frequently due to historical and social circumstances. AI can only learn what is in the data. Similarly, if there are, for example, not enough pictures of Black people in a data set, a face recognition model trained on this data will not be able to correctly identify a Black person. This is exactly what happened to Facebook last year, where a Black man in a video got wrongly labeled as primate. It is the same thing that happened to Livia when she was a child and asked her mother this racist question. All the data she had seen up to that point, her family, friends, children's books, and so on, did not include Black people. So her brain tried to make sense of the situation with the data it knew so far. And that was that these must be white people and that they must have colored their faces. Because from her previous experiences or data, she only knew white people and she also knew colors. But it is not the data alone. For an AI algorithm, like me, to learn from data, it needs an objective to optimize, a definition of success and failure. The same way you learned at school by optimizing your grades. Your grades told you whether you were successful or not, what you had to learn or not. Similarly, the algorithm is learning by looking at the data, figuring out what is associated with success. What situation leads to success? I mean, in that sense, everyone uses algorithms. You just don't formalize them in written code. Livia, for example, uses an algorithm when she is working as a photographer in her free time. The data she uses are things like the subject, the light, the time she has, the equipment. Her definition of success is, the person on the picture is happy with the photo she took. This is very different if her sister, who has no experience in photography, was in charge. She'd say success is if you could actually recognize the person on the picture because it wasn't just a blur. But with Livia's clients, Livia gets to choose success. She is in charge. Her opinion matters. And this is something very important. AI systems, algorithms are opinions embedded in code. 5 years ago, Amazon, a largely male-dominated company, decided to develop an AI tool which should go through incoming applications, rating them from 1 to 5. So as data, they gave the algorithm the past 10 years' applications submitted to the company. Sounds reasonable. What about the definition of success? Someone who is successful at Amazon. For example, someone who stayed there for 5 years and was promoted at least once. So the AI algorithm had to find out what applications, what people are successful. It learned what kind of applications historically led to success by that definition. Can you imagine what happened when they applied this tool to a current pool of applicants? The AI system was not rating candidates in a gender-neutral way. With the given data and the definition of success, the algorithm taught itself that male candidates were preferable and systematically filtered out women's applications. So, if we want to create unbiased and fair artificial intelligence, we also need to think about what objective we give them. We need to tell them that bias, prejudice, and discrimination are things they should watch out for. If we want them to learn that those things are wrong, we have to incorporate this into their training and performance evaluation. For example, when Livia made the mistake in identifying these Black people, her mother did not only correct her based on the superficial objective, that she correctly identifies them as Black people. Based on her values, she also made sure that Livia didn't associate any further differences due to skin color. So, you see, Livia's mother played a crucial role in Livia's racist or non-racist education. Similarly, in the example of Livia's photography business, it is her who sets the definition of success. It is also her who curates the data, that is, the equipment she uses. For example, she made the decision to only use Canon equipment. In the same way, it is the developing community who directly or indirectly, consciously or subconsciously introduces their own biases into AI technology like me. They choose the data, they define the optimization goal, they shape the usage of AI. I know that developers don't mean any harm and are always trying their best. Most of the time, they don't actively bring bias into these systems. However, we all suffer from unconscious biases, that is, biases we are not aware of. These biases are an attempt of our brain to simplify the incredibly complex world around us. For example, according to the affinity bias, we like people most who look and think like us, which is a simplified way of understanding and categorizing the people around us. We all have these biases, also Livia's mother, of course, which she strongly learned later on in her puberty. But luckily she was not the only person in Livia's life who shaped her values and beliefs. There was her father, for example. But even more than that. Throughout her life she had lots of different teachers, friends, co-workers, and relationships. They were all people of different ages, ethnicities, and genders, and thus showed her very diverse opinions, thoughts, and ideas. But imagine if this had not been the case. Imagine if she had only been raised by her mother. Let's spin this further. Imagine if all our children in the world were raised by a very homogeneous group of people. This is what most of our AI looks like today. The current community of AI developers is made up of over 80% white heterosexual cis men. AI is designed, developed, and evaluated by a very homogeneous group of people. The values, ideas, and biases creeping into AI systems are thus literally narrow-minded. So, a first logical step towards fairer and more unbiased AI is a diverse and inclusive AI development community. Diverse people can better check each other's blind spots, each other's biases. Second, as we can't change this community overnight, it is imperative that we educate the existing community. We need to rethink and restructure the education of AI developers, as they need as much ethical knowledge as technical knowledge to develop fair and unbiased AI systems. Third, we also need to educate the broad population about AI. Only like this we all can contribute our ideas and values to the design and development of these systems. If we want to break the bias in AI, we need to break the bias in our society. It is our society with its structures that brings bias in AI. Bias in AI is not a technical problem, it is a social one. AI is a powerful tool which will bring profound transformations to our society. So, let's use this tool to make positive changes. Let's use it for good. We can use AI to improve cancer screening, combat world hunger, or tackle climate change. We can even use AI to help us break the bias in our society. In fact, there is a company in Switzerland who is doing just that. They have used AI to develop a browser plugin that helps you write more inclusively and bias-free. Let's start the change now. Let's design fair and unbiased AI systems right from the beginning. Let's prevent our future technologies from making the same mistake as little Livia did 25 years ago. If we reflect our own biases and work all together to not just extrapolate the past but learn from it in a cautious and critical way, this is our chance to make the world into a much more inclusive, equal, and better place. Thank you.